Alright, the first thing that you need to do is open up your office document that says standard 6.33, and you should have the standard, you should have things highlighted in it. You have the establishment and the creation of the Zhou Dynasty notes. Alright, then you have a synopsis. Your synopsis is more detailed than mine is. Underneath your synopsis, I want you to write notes or type notes February 1st, the Zhou government. Okay, the first thing that we're talking about, and by the way, Riley made a good point. If you wrote your notes, then you're just going to continue writing on that same page. Alright, the government of the Zhou Dynasty. The early leaders of the Zhou Dynasty introduced the idea of the mandate of heaven. So that's going to be our very first note. Okay, so pull up your Office 365 or in your planner. Go ahead and hit enter. Do you see where bold and underline are in blue?
Yeah.
Click those and turn them back off. And then go up here to your bullets and do a solid bullet. Alright? And we're going to put the Zhou Dynasty introduced the mandate of heaven. When you get that typed, hit enter, tab, and it will take your bullet over and be hollow. Okay, so we have the Zhou Dynasty introduced the mandate of heaven, and then we have our bullet point indented over. Okay, the concept taught that leaders gained their authority to rule from the gods. Okay, so we're going to go make that note right here. That the mandate of heaven, so what pronoun could I use here? It or this gave authority to rule, authority I guess to a person to rule. This gave authority to a person to rule from the who?
God?
From the gods. Then we're going to highlight and underline, actually bold and underline, the mandate of heaven, so that we know that this next bullet right here that's indented is talking about the mandate of heaven. Here we go. Alright, so the early leaders of the Zhou Dynasty introduced the idea of the mandate of heaven. This concept taught that the leaders gained their authority to rule from the gods. They believed that when the Zhou overthrew the Shang, it was because the Shang had become tyrants. Alright, we've talked about this word right here before. Does anybody remember what a tyrant is? What is it?
It's like they rule for tyranny, like how long is it?
Okay, sort of like a dictator. What do they rule by?
Power and fear.
There you go. Yeah, fear. Alright, let's do blast from the past. Remember this types of government? And we did our spiral, we did government, we defined it. We watched a video on monarchies. Then we talked about the two different types of monarchies. We did an oligarchy, where a few rich land-owning families were the ones who ruled. Then we did a tyrant. A tyrant is a person who rules by force. And if you have a tyrant that rules, what is your type of government called?
Tyranny.
A tyranny. Okay? So, alright, so they had a tyrant who ruled in the what? Zhou or Shang? In the Shang. Okay? And so they believed that the gods allowed them to fall because of that. Okay? Because he was a tyrant. Come on, change here for me. Or not. There we go. That it allowed them to fall. Okay, let's go back to our notes. Okay, we're going to type another note in. So, when you hit enter, you should automatically get your indented hollow bullet. Okay? The Shang, ooh, that was bad. The Shang were ruling tyrants. They They ruled by force. If you did not do what they told you to do, then off with your head. They would kill you. The Zhou overthrew the Shang because they believed the gods gave them what?
The mandate of heaven.
The what? Yeah, they gave them the mandate of heaven. Or the right to rule. So we're going to go in here and we're going to say, we're going to highlight the Shang were ruling tyrants and change that to a different color. Okay, then we're going to highlight Zhou overthrew the Shang, and we're going to change that to a different color. I'm going to change that to red. And I'm going to bump my font up so that I can see who overthrew who. Okay, and then I'm going to underline and bold the mandate of heaven. Okay, the deal was, if you were given the mandate of heaven, then it was almost like the gods made a deal with you. You could have the mandate of heaven and be the ruler, but in return, what kind of ruler were you supposed to be? A good, fair, just ruler. All right, clearly, the Shang were being tyrants. Were they being good, fair, just rulers?
No.
No, so that's why the Zhou believed that the gods pulled that power away from the Shang and gave it to the Zhou, and they believe that's why the Zhou were able to overthrow the Shang, because where were the gods' powers? They were with the who? The Zhou. It switched because the Shang were being mean to their people, and they said, well, the gods just pulled that mandate from you, and they gave it to the Zhou, and now the Zhou are going to rule because they're going to be fair, good, and just to their people, or so they said. All right, when you have that last note taken, hit enter. Okay, you don't want that bullet now because we're moving on. Hit backspace. Okay, it takes you back to the front. And then go up here to your bullets and do a solid bullet again. And it'll put it back in place where we want it. Okay, we're moving on to the next note. If you didn't catch how to do that and a neighbor did, get them to show you how. All right, next thing. The government of the Zhou was based on the feudal system. Okay, here's another one that you should be familiar with. Okay, blast from the past again. All right, democracy, ruled by the people. We did direct and representative. Dictatorship is ruled by military force. Okay, so I can understand why people think that, like Hitler was a tyrant. You can be a dictator and a tyrant at the same time. Okay? Tyrants rule by force. Dictators rule by force. They use military force. So I can see why you get those two kind of like mixed up or call them the same, and that's okay. If you want to say that Hitler was a tyrant, he was a tyrant. He did rule by force, but he was under a dictatorship because he was the dictator. All right, theocracy. Anytime you hear that word, root word theo, think of theology. You should think of religion. So theocracy is ruled by a religious leader. Anarchy. That's when you have what?
No ruling.
No ruling whatsoever, and it's craziness. Okay, feudal system. Here we go. A feudal system is a type of government that when a peasant or a worker called a vassal is given a fief. Okay? A fief is a piece of land. In return, they have to serve the king. The fiefs, in order to make sure that you did what you were supposed to do when you were out there on that land, the fiefs had rulers over them, or watchers, I guess you could call them, that were relatives of the king. Okay, well, what is a relative of the king called? A noble. So the nobles owned the farmers. So what were those workers and peasants really kind of, what were they? They were slaves. So they got to live on that piece of land and work it for food. They got to live there for free, quote unquote. But what was their pay? What did they have to pay back? Serve the king. Okay, so let's go back now to our notes. And if you want to change colors so that you can see this better, you are welcome to. I think I will. All right, we're going to type the feudal system. All right, hit enter and hollow bullet. Okay, we're going to put peasants, worked the fiefs. And what was the fiefs? A piece of land. Okay, what did they do in return? In return, they served the king. Okay, what were these peasants? Let's go back up here to the peasants. What were they called? Oh, it starts with a V. Hunter? Vassals. They were called vassals. Okay, the peasants were called vassals. They worked the fiefs, the piece of land. Yeah, Hunter? Okay, now, who stood watch over the lands? Nobles. Okay. All right. The king's relatives, nobles, watched, well, let's put ruled because that's what they really did do. Ruled the fiefs. All right, what else did they do? The nobles had something. Look at my notes here. What they own. No, the king owned the land. There you go. They owned the peasants.
Wait, so the nobles own the peasants, but the king got the money?
Okay, hang on and let me hit pause here. Alright, go ahead and get this typed. Okay, if you're using Office 365 or even if you're writing, we're going to highlight a few things, okay? So the main word here is vassals. So you can do Control B and bold it. And if you want to change the font color to another font, you can, so that you can see it. We're going to highlight fiefs. Okay? Bold it. Well, that wasn't what I wanted to do, so I'm going to use my undo button. Okay? Bold it. And let's change, I'm going to change it to a different color. Alright, nobles, that's another word you need to be familiar with. Bold it and change it to a different color. And I can't really see vassals in purple too. Well, can you here on screen? Well, I guess you can.
I can see it.
Okay, so if you're writing, you can use coloring pencils or just your regular pencil to highlight. You can bubble, cloud, star, underline, double underline, triple underline. You can write over the word so that it bolds it. Alright, so get that done and we're moving on. Okay, so last little thing now. This right here basically sums it up. In a feudal system, a peasant or a worker received a piece of land in return for serving their lord or king, especially during times of war. Alright, during times of war, if you were loyal to your king, especially in the Middle Ages time, lots of times in the Middle Ages, you know where you had the castle, then you had the wall around the castle, then the moat around the wall. If you were a peasant working on the lands outside of that kingdom, and you went to war, if you had served your king well, he would allow you to come inside that wall. Now, why would he let you come in there?
So so he could still work because he was a good worker.
Okay, well, something else. What do you think, William?
As a reward, because if they go to war, he can be killed. He might have to fight to keep that himself from being captured or something. And if he's being a good worker, it's kind of like a reward, so he doesn't have to go through like fighting and stuff.
Okay, what do you think, Hunter?
You need him to work inside things.
Need him to work inside? Okay, somebody's got it. The reason they would let you leave your land outside there and come inside the wall was for protection. You're a good worker. You take care of the land that you're given. You raise the crops you need to raise. You constantly are doing what you need to do to serve your king. So it's almost like a reward. If you do that in service to your king, then your king would protect you in times of war. Okay? So in return for serving the Lord or king, especially in times of war, they were expected to perform various duties in exchange for their own fiefs or areas of land. Okay? Now, I'm not going to record what we're doing next, but I'll tell you guys in internet land, it is a put the sentences back together to form a paragraph. And this one's kind of tough, so we'll see if your classmates can do it. Okay, so if you listen to this video, you will be caught up, my dancers, my tiny dancers, my little dancers, when you get back and you won't have to worry about it. Okay, see you, bye.